It was just another ordinary night at one of New York's most exclusive steakhouses. The dim lights of the Lux Grill cast a golden hue over the polished marble, the clink of glasses and the murmur of high-powered conversations filling the air. But in the middle of all that luxury, something unexpected was about to unfold. At table 12, a group of wealthy businessmen were settling in for their usual dinner. Expensive wine, rare steaks, and conversation about deals that would make most people's heads spin. But across the room, a storm was brewing. Nia Thomas, a young black woman in her early 30s, stood at the back of the room, adjusting her apron. With her dark, smooth skin and sharp features, she was the picture of grace under pressure. She'd worked at the Lux for almost 5 years, enough to know the unspoken rules of the game. She had learned to smile when insulted, to nod when dismissed, and to keep her head down when the rich played their power games. But tonight was different. As Nia approached James Harper, the billionaire CEO of a tech company that had shaken the very foundations of Silicon Valley, the room fell silent. He looked up from his steak, eyes flashing with irritation. "Excuse me," he sneered, not even bothering to mask his contempt. "Did you even bother to read the menu? This isn't what I ordered." His voice was low but sharp, like a knife cutting through the air. Nia felt her pulse quicken. She could feel every pair of eyes in the restaurant now on her. A moment of truth. The tension hung thick. But instead of shrinking, instead of backing away, she stood tall. She didn't flinch. She didn't apologize. No, this was different. Tonight, she was done being invisible. "I don't take orders from people who don't know what they're really hungry for," she replied, her voice calm, but carrying the weight of 1,000 unspoken stories. The silence that followed was deafening. No one moved. No one breathed. And in that moment, the world would know Nia Thomas's name. Nia Thomas wasn't just any waitress. At the Lux Grill, she had earned her reputation long before that fateful night. A woman in her early 30s, Nia had a calm and collected demeanor that many mistook for stoic silence. But those who really took the time to watch her knew better. Her eyes were sharp, always scanning the room, reading the energy of the people she served before she even approached their table. It was a skill she'd perfected over the years, a survival instinct born from the harsh reality of being a black woman in a world that often overlooked her. Her physique was athletic, toned, and her presence was undeniable. She stood at 5 feet 8 inches, with a graceful yet strong posture that suggested someone who had learned how to carry both physical and emotional burdens. Her features were striking: high cheekbones, a smooth complexion, and deep brown eyes that seemed to hold an ocean of untold stories. Despite her quiet demeanor, there was something about Nia that commanded respect. Maybe it was the way she never hurried, always moving with purpose, or how she had this uncanny ability to read a situation before it even unfolded. But life outside the Lux was what truly shaped Nia. She was a single mom to a young daughter named Sienna, a bright and spirited 7-year-old who kept Nia grounded. Her days were filled with long shifts, managing demanding customers and the constant pressure of being underestimated. But when she came home, Nia was just a mom, making dinner, helping with homework, and tucking her daughter into bed at night. Those small moments with Sienna, those everyday miracles of motherhood, were what kept her going. Despite the daily grind, Nia carried a sense of pride in her work. She wasn't just serving food, she was serving dignity, patience, and respect. And although she often received little acknowledgement for the emotional labor that came with the job, Nia never wavered in her commitment to do her best. After all, she wasn't just doing this for herself. She was doing it for Sienna, so that one day her daughter wouldn't have to fight as hard for her voice to be heard. The atmosphere in the Lux Grill shifted in an instant. It was as if the air itself had thickened, waiting for something to break. Nia was standing at table 12, her posture as poised as always, but the tension was undeniable. Across from her, James Harper, the Billionaire CEO, had already taken a sip from his glass of 2015 Chateau Margaux, the wine swirling in his crystal goblet. He set it down with a clink, his eyes narrowing as he looked up at her. Nia approached with her usual calm, ready to serve the next course. She'd seen his kind before, powerful, used to getting what they wanted, used to being catered to without a second thought. But there was something about James that rubbed her the wrong way. His arrogance, his air of superiority, the way he seemed to assume everyone around him was lesser. As Nia placed the plate in front of him, a subtle misstep happened. She had assumed he wanted the grilled ribeye, but he had ordered the Wagyu sirloin instead. "That's not what I ordered," James snapped, the words sharp and dismissive. His voice wasn't loud, but it carried the weight of someone who thought their status gave them the right to be rude. "Do you even know the difference? This is Wagyu, not ribeye. You can't even get that right." Nia paused for a moment, holding her breath. She had worked in this restaurant for years, and she knew this moment could go one of two ways. The last thing she wanted was to be humiliated in front of everyone, but she wouldn't let him treat her like a servant. Not today. Not anymore. She met his gaze, her brown eyes steady. "I'm sorry for the mix-up," she said, her voice calm and controlled. "But I'm not the one who ordered it wrong." The words were simple, but there was no mistaking the fire in her tone. James's face flushed with anger. His grip tightened around his silverware as he leaned back in his chair, raising his voice slightly. "I don't take orders from people who don't know how to do their job." But Nia didn't flinch. She took a deep breath, prepared to say something that would stop this in its tracks. The room seemed to hold its breath. The chatter from the other tables faded into the background as Nia stood tall in front of James Harper. His eyes flashed with annoyance, but she didn't back down. She had seen men like him before, people who believed they could use their wealth and status to control everyone around them. But Nia had learned something over the years. Respect was earned, not demanded. She took a step closer, her calm gaze unwavering. The kitchen behind her buzzed with activity, but in that moment, she was completely still. "You're right," Nia said, her voice low but steady. "You didn't ask me for my opinion, but you did ask for respect. And you didn't offer any in return." There was a pause, a crack in the tension, as the words hung in the air between them. James blinked, taken aback by the unexpected pushback. For a moment, it seemed as if the whole restaurant was watching, waiting to see what would happen next. His lips twisted into a thin, controlled smile. "So now you're giving me a lesson on respect," he sneered. "I didn't come here for a lecture. I came here for a perfect meal, and you can't even get that right." Nia's jaw clenched, but her voice remained calm. "I'm not giving you a lesson. I'm simply telling you the truth. You don't get to treat people like they don't matter just because you can buy everything around you. That's not respect." The words landed like a punch, cutting through the tension. For the first time, James looked slightly shaken. The smugness that had filled his expression moments before began to slip away, replaced with something closer to confusion. "I'm refusing to serve your anger," Nia continued, her voice gaining strength. "I'm not here to feed your frustration. I'm here to do my job with dignity. And I expect the same in return." There was a long, uncomfortable silence. No one dared to speak. Not even the other servers moved. In that moment, Nia wasn't just a waitress. She was a woman who had taken control of her own narrative. James's eyes narrowed as he stared at Nia, his expression darkening with every passing second. The nerve of this woman, he thought. How dare she stand in front of him, a man who could make or break careers with a single word, and lecture him about respect. His hand clenched around his wine glass, knuckles turning white. "You're really pushing it now," he said, his voice dangerously low, almost a growl. "I'm a paying customer. The least you can do is serve my meal without giving me an attitude." Nia stood firm, her posture unwavering. She didn't flinch or back down. She had seen this before, the attempt to break someone down with sheer force, with arrogance and entitlement. She had seen people like James before, people who thought their wealth and status gave them the right to treat others like dirt. But tonight, Nia wasn't going to be a doormat. She wasn't going to just apologize and take his abuse. Not anymore. She had too much self-respect to let someone like him think he could walk all over her. "I'm not giving you attitude, Mr. Harper," she said, her voice still calm but now edged with steel. "I'm simply refusing to let you talk down to me. You came in here expecting perfection, but you're the one who's failing in every way that matters." James leaned forward, his chair scraping against the floor, his eyes blazing with fury. "You think you can teach me something?" he snapped. "Do you know who I am? Do you even understand what it costs for someone like you to make me wait for my food?" The arrogance in his voice was almost suffocating. But Nia didn't flinch. She just stared at him, unfazed. "I know exactly who you are, Mr. Harper," she said, her tone flat. "And I know that no amount of money can buy respect. Not from me, and not from anyone else who knows their worth. James gritted his teeth, his eyes seething with anger. "You're making a huge mistake, lady," he warned, his voice rising. "I'll have you fired before you can blink. This little stunt of yours is over." Nia looked at him, her eyes steady. "You can try, but this isn't about my job," she said quietly. "This is about standing up for what's right. And I don't need your approval to do that." She turned to walk away, but James's voice stopped her, laced with venom. "I'll make sure you regret this." She didn't turn back. She didn't need to. She had already won. As Nia turned to walk away, her mind already focused on the next task at hand, she didn't notice the man at the table next to hers. He had been watching the entire scene unfold, his eyes darting between Nia and James, and then, in a quick motion, he pulled out his phone. He didn't even think twice. His fingers moved swiftly, capturing the last exchange between Nia and James. The camera zoomed in just as James stood up, his voice laced with venom, his face red with fury. "You'll regret this, lady," he had said. The camera captured every moment, Nia's unwavering stance, her eyes filled with a quiet fire. The man hit record, holding his phone steady as James made his threats, but the footage that really mattered came after that. It was Nia's words, delivered with such quiet resolve, that resonated the most. "I'm refusing to serve your anger, not your order." With a single press of a button, the video was shared. At first, it was just a small ripple. A few likes. A couple of comments. But within minutes, things began to snowball. People on Instagram, Twitter, and Reddit were already sharing it. Hashtags like #RespectNotAnger and #StandUpForYourself spread like wildfire. Within an hour, the video had amassed thousands of views. By the next morning, it had gone viral. Some praised Nia for her calm courage, calling her a hero. Others, mostly James's supporters, criticized her for being unprofessional, for defying a paying customer, no matter how rude he was. But the battle in the comments section wasn't just a battle for the truth, it was a reflection of something deeper. The viral moment turned into a conversation. A conversation about power, respect, and the way people treated others based on their status, and whether or not money could buy dignity. Nia didn't know it yet, but her life was about to change. She had just made an impression, one that wouldn't be easy to erase. Back in the kitchen, Nia couldn't shake the feeling that something had shifted. She had heard the whispers, the occasional side eye from the other servers. The usual hum of the kitchen had been replaced with a strange silence. And then, the phone buzzes. A notification. Another comment. Another message. Nia took a deep breath, walking over to the prep counter where she had momentarily set her phone down. As the screen lit up, she saw it, the video. Her words, her moment of confrontation with James, now shared 1,000 times over. The comments poured in like a flood, some praising her, others criticizing her. The usual internet chaos. She scrolled through a few of the reactions. Finally, someone had the guts to stand up to people like him. How unprofessional, no place for that in a service industry. But then there were others. A hero, one comment read. A woman with self-respect. Nia paused, her fingers resting on the edge of her phone. It had started as a simple moment, just her doing her job, trying to defuse a tense situation. But now she was everywhere, and the world had seen her stand her ground. It was both empowering and overwhelming. In the quiet of the kitchen, she looked up at the walls. Familiar faces, familiar routines. But tonight, it felt different. She had crossed a line. Not into defiance, but into something more personal. Nia ran her hands over her face, reflecting on everything that had led up to this moment. She hadn't expected it to get this big, but she wasn't backing down now. She couldn't. For Sienna, for herself, for all the nights she had swallowed her pride for the sake of keeping the peace. Tonight she had finally said enough. There was a quiet strength in that. And Nia realized that standing up for herself wasn't just about one moment in a restaurant. It was about reclaiming her own dignity. She wasn't just protecting her job, she was protecting the person she had become. She took another breath and looked at the clock. Her shift was almost over. But one thing was clear. This wasn't just about a customer. It was about who she was. And from now on, she was going to be unapologetic about that. Later that night, after the chaos of the dinner had settled, James sat alone in his luxury penthouse in Tribeca. The skyline of New York spread out before him. The glass walls of his apartment gleamed under the soft city lights, but despite the beauty of the view, he felt none of his usual satisfaction. He leaned back in his chair, staring at his phone. His publicist had texted him several times, urging him to release a statement about the incident. His assistant had called twice, asking him if he needed anything, as if they could fix this with a few words or a quick solution. But none of it felt right. The video was everywhere now. It had gone viral faster than he could have imagined. The moment he had snapped at Nia, the moment he had tried to crush her with his words, was being watched by millions. The angry CEO, the entitled billionaire who always got his way, now portrayed as the villain in a story he hadn't written. As James scrolled through the comments, his stomach turned. Some called him a bully, others, out of touch. The hashtag respect not anger was everywhere. He hated it. He had seen people he respected call him out. In all his years of success, in all the high-profile meetings he'd been in, never had he felt so exposed. The silence of his apartment felt suffocating. He had grown accustomed to the hustle of meetings, the noise of constant communication, the distractions. But now, in this stillness, he could hear it, his own thoughts, echoing like a warning. It wasn't about the Wagyu steak or the ribeye anymore. It wasn't even about the food. It was about something deeper. Something that Nia had said, a simple but powerful statement. "I'm refusing to serve your anger, not your order." He ran his fingers through his hair, letting out a long, slow breath. It had been hours since the incident, and he hadn't stopped thinking about those words. He had been so focused on power, so used to people accommodating him, that he hadn't stopped to consider the human side of things. In that moment, Nia had shown him something he hadn't expected. Strength. Dignity. James realized, for the first time, that money and status weren't enough to make someone truly powerful. It didn't matter how many zeros were on his paycheck, or how many people looked to him for decisions. Respect was earned. And he had lost that with one careless outburst. He didn't know what to do with this feeling. But for the first time, James felt regret. And regret was a feeling he wasn't used to having. The following morning, James sat at his desk in his sleek, minimalist office on the Upper East Side. The view outside was a perfect picture of success. Manhattan's towering skyscrapers framed by the bright blue sky. Yet, inside, the weight of his actions from the night before pressed down on him like a vice. He stared at his computer screen, but the words in his emails blurred together. His publicist had already drafted an apology, a carefully worded statement designed to defuse the situation. But something felt off. He couldn't bring himself to sign it. The words seemed hollow, disconnected from the raw emotion of what had transpired. As he leaned back in his chair, his mind kept returning to the moment in the restaurant, to Nia's eyes, calm and unwavering as she stood her ground. It was like a mirror that reflected everything he had been ignoring. The privilege, the arrogance, the sense of entitlement that had built his empire. James had always believed he was in control. But now, looking back, he realized how much of his life had been driven by fear. Fear of losing everything he had built, fear of being exposed for what he really was. He had spent years climbing the corporate ladder, surrounded by yes-men, people who worshipped his every move. The meetings, the dinners, the endless applause. But all of it had been a mask, a shield. Beneath it all, there was a man who didn't know how to relate to people, a man who hid behind his wealth and power because he feared vulnerability. James was never taught how to truly connect with others. He had grown up in privilege, yes, but it was the kind of privilege that isolated him, kept him distant from those who couldn't offer him anything in return. He realized, with a heavy heart, that he had never truly listened to people like Nia, people who didn't have the luxury of hiding behind the shield of money. Nia had cut through all of it. She didn't flinch when he tried to tear her down, and that stung more than he wanted to admit. For the first time, James had been forced to confront something he had avoided his entire life. The truth. And that truth was simple. Power alone doesn't make you strong. It was in this moment of clarity that James knew he had to change. But how? And could he? By the time the sun set that evening, Nia's confrontation with James had already taken on a life of its own. What had started as a single heated moment in a Manhattan steakhouse had spiraled into a full-blown social movement. The video, shared across every platform from Instagram to Reddit, was everywhere. And so was the conversation it sparked. People couldn't stop talking about it. News outlets picked up the story, dissecting it frame by frame. TV anchors discussed it in their nightly shows. Hashtags like #RespectNotAnger and #StandYourGround began trending, flooding Twitter feeds and Instagram stories. The video was so widely shared that even celebrities began chiming in, offering their support for Nia or denouncing James's behavior. For Nia, it was overwhelming. Her phone buzzed non-stop with messages from old friends, reporters, and strangers. The same people who had once ignored her, who had walked past her every day in the restaurant without a second glance, were now congratulating her. Some called her a hero. Others, less kindly, labeled her unprofessional. But the one thing no one could deny was the power of what she had done. She had made a statement, loud and clear. In boardrooms across the country, corporate leaders began to take note. The incident had forced a re-examination of power dynamics in the service industry and beyond. It wasn't just about a billionaire CEO snapping at a waitress anymore. It was about human dignity. It was about treating people with respect, regardless of their job title, pay grade, or social standing. The internet had a field day with the video, yes, but it also made an impact on the way people thought about their treatment of others. For the first time, everyday workers were applauded not just for their skills, but for their courage to stand up to authority. Nia's actions had turned her into a symbol of something bigger, a symbol of empowerment, of speaking truth to those who had forgotten how to listen. As the days passed, the buzz around Nia's stand continued to grow. People from all walks of life began to reflect on what they had witnessed. But beneath the viral headlines and heated debates, one truth stood clear. The real lesson wasn't about who was right or wrong in the moment. It was about the importance of standing up for yourself and the power of respect. Nia hadn't set out to make a statement. She hadn't expected to become the face of a movement. All she had done was refuse to accept disrespect, something that, for far too long, she had swallowed in silence. The incident showed that it's not about being loud or confrontational. Real strength comes in knowing when to speak up, when to set boundaries, and when to refuse to let anyone walk over you. The lesson wasn't just about standing up to others, but about standing firm in your own values. Nia had something no one could take from her: her dignity. In a world where many are willing to compromise their self-worth for convenience or acceptance, Nia's quiet strength reminded everyone that we don't have to sacrifice who we are to fit in. And for James Harper, it was a different lesson altogether. In his world of wealth and influence, he had relied on power to get what he wanted. But through this encounter, he realized that true leadership wasn't about control. It wasn't about dictating terms or demanding loyalty. It was about earning respect. And that respect was something that couldn't be bought. For all the people who watched, the message was clear. Respect is not a privilege, it's a right. Nia's act of standing her ground had reminded the world that no one is less than anyone else, regardless of status, title, or wealth. Everyone deserves to be treated with dignity. In the end, Nia didn't just change the course of one evening. She changed the way people thought about respect, equality, and power. She showed that one person's quiet resolve could be the spark that ignites something much bigger than any one individual. As the story of Nia Thomas and James Harper continued to ripple across social media and news outlets, one thing became clear. This was more than just a viral moment. It was a turning point. It was proof that standing up for yourself can start conversations that change the world. Nia's simple yet profound act of refusing to accept disrespect sent a message that resonated with millions. You don't have to accept being treated badly. You have the power to speak up. In the end, it wasn't about a billionaire CEO or a waitress. It was about the values we choose to stand for, the respect we demand and the dignity we expect. Nia showed us that real strength isn't about making the loudest noise. It's about standing your ground with grace, even when the odds are stacked against you. As for James Harper, the lessons weren't lost on him. He would have to reckon with the consequences of his actions. The power he once took for granted now felt fragile, and for the first time in a long time, he was forced to rethink what true power really meant. But for Nia, life moved forward. She didn't do this for the headlines, for the praise, or the online support. She did it because she believed that everyone, no matter who they were or where they came from, deserved to be treated with respect. And that belief would always guide her. Now, we want to hear from you. How do you stand up for yourself when faced with disrespect? Have you ever been in a situation like Nia's? Share your thoughts in the comments below. If this story inspired you, don't forget to like and subscribe for more stories that celebrate strength, dignity, and real change. Let's keep the conversation going. Your voice matters. Don't let anyone silence it.